Hello. Hi. Just making sure everyone can hear me. How much time do we have? All right, we have a minute before this, so let's do this really quickly because I think this is going to be a great way to start up this show. Yes. That didn't work. Then we're going to do this. I was going to do the original intro because who here doesn't love that? But let's do something even cooler. And we're going to start out with the cooler than that, the often unseen season 3 intro.
Come on, everybody.
We need some hot mics over here.
Anybody named Mike want to dance? Hey, there we go.
Thank you.
How about this one?
Let's try this again.
There we go.
Let's go.
Come on, everybody.
The Dungeons and Dragons ride! Wow, neat!
Give me a break.
What's happening?
Oh no!
No sweat.
Presto! Back off!
Young pupils, this way.
The Dungeon Master, help!
There is no escape from the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
How's everyone doing today? First off, I want to thank everybody for being here. This is incredible. I'm blown away by the love for this cartoon, the love for everybody here, and you get me with it, so there's a downside to everything. Thank you so much for being here. My name is TJ Shevlin. I am one of the 2023 Eisner Award judges for this year. I've worked for IDW Publishing, and I currently work at Upper Deck Entertainment. But none of that stuff matters because we are here for everybody else at the table. So let's start to my left. Oh, this is where you get to shine, David.
Oh my God, I just froze. Hi, my name is David Booher, and I am here because I write the Dungeons and Dragons Saturday Morning Adventures for IDW Publishing. This is a brand new... Yeah! This is a brand new story that just came out a few months ago. All 4 issues are out. The collection is coming out soon. But this is basically, we treated this as a lost episode of the cartoon. And if you have any hesitation, I love this cartoon. I was an 80s kid. I grew up with this cartoon. I'm absolutely fanboying out right now being on this panel and having to introduce myself first. So without further ado, Frank.
Gosh, ditto. I feel like I just walked into a tower of powerful wizards, and I'm there with like a dagger. My name is Frank Todaro. I'm a voice actor, and I'm here because I play Dungeons and Dragons a lot, and it has pretty much been a huge part of my journey in order to do what I do to pay the rent. And the gateway was this cartoon. And enough about me, please.
Hi, I'm Luke Gygax. I'm patient 0 for Dungeons and Dragons. I was the first person who was raised playing Dungeons and Dragons from literally their first memories. So my dad created Dungeons and Dragons, and I remember how excited we were when this cartoon hit the airwaves, and we'd cheer every time his name came on. So it was a big deal, and what a pleasure to be here. So thank you.
At the end of every episode, you saw it say, developed for television by Mark Evanier. I'm Mark Evanier. And I wrote the pilot for the script and the Bible for it, and half of one other episode, and when we get later into this, I'll tell the story of how all that happened and why I didn't stay with it.
Yay, and I wouldn't be here without him. Yay. So I'm Katie Leigh, and I had the pleasure of voicing Sheila for the cartoon.
Yes.
I am so very thankful to see all your faces, and this is my first time cosplaying.
Yes.
Well, Katie, you cosplay for a profession. You just don't usually dress up for it.
Is that what it is?
All right, well, thank you so much, guys. So let's get into it. And Mark, we'll start with you on this one because this is probably the most natural place to begin. Can you talk to us about what it was like developing the cartoon, working with Gary, and working with the Marvel Productions team, and how this all came about?
Okay, I didn't work with Gary at all.
There we go.
But what happened was I was writing a lot of Saturday morning cartoon shows at the time, and I was the troubleshooter they brought in when a show was being developed and the network wasn't quite ready to buy it. They weren't happy with it. Other people had done scripts and materials for this, and the lady at CBS, whose name was Judy Price, she was the vice president of children's programming, said to the people at Marvel Productions, "You haven't got it yet. The show's got a lot of bugs in it. We can't order." You know, in Saturday morning animation back then, and still to some extent in animation, you don't make a pilot show. You don't actually film a pilot show. They buy the show based on a script, a Bible which outlines what's going to happen in the series and what episodes will be like, and a pilot script and a Bible and some artwork. And they weren't ready to commit to it yet. So Marvel came to me and said, "You're the only writer Judy will trust. Can you write a new Bible for us and a pilot script?" And I said, "How long have you got for this to be done?" And they said, "We need it in 4 days." Now, that same year, I wrote a pilot for ABC that sold, and I took my name off it. And I wrote a pilot for NBC that sold and took my name off it. So this year I got the trifecta. I basically had about 4 days to write the pilot script. CBS committed to it. And then we did some polishing of the script after they had agreed to spend millions of dollars on 13 episodes. There wasn't a lot of time to think about stuff. And a lot of what I did was taking stuff that other people had done before me, and I have no idea exactly who some of those people were, and simplify it down. The show at that point was really complex. There were about 8 recurring monsters in it. There were 9 other creatures roaming around in it. It just had too many people in it. I later heard that certain people involved in this were a little annoyed at me because by taking those characters out, I had killed a lot of toy deals. But my mission was to do a show that the CBS would buy. They bought it. They asked me to come in and story edit it. At that point, I had too many other offers for other things, and I helped do one other script, and I recommended a couple of my friends to write on the show and work on it, and I kind of advised on the cat. Have we got this? Is this picture up? Can we put this?
I was trying to get that picture up, actually. Can we get that on the screen?
Okay. Can we put that picture up for a second on the main screen for everybody? All right, this is the voice cast, but look at the man at the very top of the screen. That's a man named Hank Soroyan, who deserves as much credit for the success of this show as anyone else, and Hank passed away a couple years ago. Hank and I shared an office at Hanna-Barbera. He was story editing Laverne and Shirley in the Army, and I was story editing Richie Rich. And he was a great guy. We worked together a lot. And Hank, I don't think he gets enough. Everybody in that picture deserves a lot of credit. Everybody else in that picture did voices, except for Frank Welker on the bottom, who did 93 voices. And it was.
I might have done 2.
Okay. I worked a lot with Hanna-Barbera, and Joe Barbera used to say, when you have a new show to cast, it's very important to audition everybody in town. You've got to hear every possible candidate before you hire Frank Welker. And Frank did that. I suggested Peter Cullen for Venger because I didn't know anybody who had a creepier, more majestic voice in the world. And I wish I had suggested Katie because she was perfect casting for that. But I didn't know Katie until this show, really. I think Hank's the one who who
I auditioned.
found. Yeah, okay. Anyway, they got a very good cast together. They got some very good writers together, and I was a spectator thereafter because I was off doing other stuff, and I was very pleased with most of what I saw.
All right.
Katie, can you talk about your experience on the show with auditioning and getting in there with the cast?
Well, I do not remember auditioning,
Fair enough.
but I was very happy. I think it's because, did you write anything for Pandemonium?
No.
Okay, well, I had done another show for Marvel where I played like a young adventurer, and that was kind of a disastrous show, but with a great cast. So I got to audition for this, and so exciting because Hank, and Mark's right, Hank is just the force behind everything. And it was his idea to get on camera, we're not gonna cry. But his idea to get the cast, Willie Ames and Adam Rich and Donnie Most, and I was like, wow, because I was pretty new to voiceover, and to be working with these celebrities was pretty darn awesome. So I felt like, a little fly on the wall and happy to be there. It was amazing.
Sorry about that. I was pulling up something for this.
Did you get a message? Is there something important?
No, I was actually pulling up the next thing over here.
Oh,
Luke, how about on your end? I know that you were a kid at the time, but I kind of feel like you must have gotten some sense of what was going on via listening or osmosis. I don't know, luck, as far as your father's involvement. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that very complex setup that Mark was talking about was probably from my dad, and he probably had dumbed it down to just 9 monsters from 140 or whatever that he probably wanted to put in there. But understandably, for playing to a young audience, that wasn't feasible. But my brother Ernie and my dad discussed it all and kind of laid out that that Bible initially that got modified and before it made it in there. But another guy, I don't know. Did you know Flint Dilley at all?
I knew Flint very well.
Yeah. So Flint was up there writing Sagard books up at the house in Beverly Hills there in the studio, and so Ernie would be talking about it with my dad and I, and be kicking ideas around, and so kind of learned storytelling and that sort of stuff right there in the den at 12 years old. But yeah, like you said, a lot of the cartoon stuff had to pass through, TV, and it was very different than what you would have imagined as an TTRPG
Sure.
player, right? So some of those themes that ran through it, like obviously Dungeon Master showing up, right, doesn't reflect the game, but it was a great device, and I think it really introduced so many young people to the concepts of D&D, right? And then here we are today, right, with lots of people playing D. Obviously, there's a couple other, that whole 5th edition thing, but
there's
a lot of us
few people
oldsters.
who still play.
I heard that, yeah. I heard there's a couple of people who still play.
There might be 1 or 2 in this room.
I think so. Yeah. Anybody ever played D&D? All right. So I just want to know, did you the character Uni? Everyone always picked on Uni and said, why does Uni the unicorn sound like a goat? And well, I think I was showing a picture of my dad to somebody, and he was out in our barn where we had an old goat that somebody gave us that had a single horn that we called Unicorn. And I was like, that's probably where Uni the unicorn came from, and I don't know if that's how it ended up with a goat voice or if there's a different story.
I wasn't around when they picked the final voices.
Okay.
Frank probably just did a few different things, and
And that
Hank
one worked.
said that one will work.
That one worked.
I think it was the only voice Frank had left that hadn't been the star of a cartoon show.
I got to say one thing about Frank, because I worked on a few shows with Frank. Dungeons and Dragons for how many years? I don't know, 3?
3.
Okay, then we did Muppet Babies, and I always sat next to him, and he could imitate so many people, right? But I said, sorry, Frank, you can't sound like me. He tried. He'd imitate me, but he couldn't sound like me.
We did. I'll tell you something interesting here. A year Muppet Babies came out, they used to do these primetime specials that would preview the Saturday morning schedule. Remember they used to do those things? I produced a bunch of those over the years, and I produced the one for CBS. I think not the first year Dungeons & Dragons was on, but the second year when Muppet Babies came from the same producers. And we did a special, I think it's on YouTube someplace, with Joyce DeWitt and Ted Knight as people in a cartoon studio, as a tour of this, and of the studio, and we would put in clips from the new Saturday morning shows at the same time. This show was put together about in the same amount of time I had to write the script for Dungeons and Dragons. And and if you see that, find that show, Hank Soroyan's in it. We showed him directing a voice session of Muppet Babies. We didn't have room for the whole cast, so we just had Frank Welker, Howie Mandel, Russi Taylor, and the lady who did Miss Piggy, Laurie.
Yeah, Barbara Billingsley and Laurie
No,
O'Brien.
no, Laurie O'Brien. We had those four of them. We couldn't get
get
Katie.
Barbara?
Couldn't get. Well, no, they didn't want Barbara on camera. They wanted to keep the mama character from Muppet Babies mysterious. So we just had. So you'll see if you see that show, you'll see Hank directing Frank and Howie and all these people. And then at the end of the show, we put Joyce DeWitt into an animated sequence from Dungeons and Dragons. We chroma keyed her in and had her all the kids fighting Venger and doing all this screaming and stuff like that, and she's in the end of the episode. When you do a network special in primetime, they used to have a rule that you had to have clear division between the commercials and the program. So you had to go, before a commercial, you had to stop and go, and now a word from our sponsor, and then you had to say, and now back to the show. So you had to bring an announcer to do that, and we needed an announcer at the last minute, and I called my friend Frank Welker, and he came running over to do it, and he ended up, Peter Cullen came in and he voiced some new dialogue for Venger, threatening to kill Joyce DeWitt. And Frank then put in all of the, if you saw that show, there's all these screams of monsters and such. Frank did those in the recording studio the night before the show aired.
Wow.
And you'll hear Frank as the announcer saying, "We'll be right back with more of the show, folks." And he was amazing on that thing. And that is kind of a lost sequence of Dungeons and Dragons that only aired once. Wow. And if you look at YouTube, I think it was called Saturday's the Place or the Saturday Preview. I did so many of these things. I don't remember what it was
They're
called.
smart. They can figure
Yeah,
it
they'll find it there, but it's you'll see about 2 minutes of a Dungeons and Dragons episode you'll recognize repurposed for that. And they sent over the actual backgrounds from the paintings that they'd done in wherever they animated it, Taiwan or someplace, and we chroma keyed Joyce DeWitt into the actual backgrounds and put her there. Anyway.
I do have to say real quick, the idea of Venger wanting to kill Joyce DeWitt makes me question what kind of roommate she was on Three's Company. So I don't know how that went for all of them there.
And what's her character class? I mean, yeah.
I was gonna say pain in the ass mostly, but Frank, and now that we're here with you, let's talk to you a little bit, man. This is actually both for you and David. Growing up on the cartoon and now working in the industry in two different but very strong beloved areas of why we're all here, what was the cartoon like for you? How did it lead you to the game or to the toys or, voice acting, writing, all of these things? There's always kind of an origin point there, and it seems like for a lot of us here, it's this cartoon.
Sure. Well, I mean, we all love Star Wars, right? But you can never be in Star Wars. I'm going somewhere here. Because, it's in a galaxy far, far away, long, long ago. And then The Last Starfighter comes out, and Alex Rogan plays a video game, and he gets shunted off to Star Wars. And wow, that's possible. When I was a little kid, my first book was, it was the book and record of the Rankin Bass Hobbit. And I was hooked on sword and sorcery. And I read those things way too early before I really understood them and such. And then comes Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm watching these kids go into this world that I want to be a part of. And, the Beholder was weird, and I want to know more about this thing. I think that's like the second episode, right?
Yep, Eye of the Beholder.
And I needed to know more. And I thought, like, if I go up to Rye Playland, because I'm from Queens, if it doesn't tear me in half because it's Rye Playland, I might be shunted off and meet the dungeon master and hang out with Eric because he sounded like my neighbors. Donnie Most had a little New York lilt there, and like, hey, give me a break. And that was it. And then I found out it was a game. And man, your dad really affected my life because doing different voices. We couldn't afford the books as a kid, so I have this marble notebook that I made up rules in, and we stole dice from other game sets and stuff. And based on what we saw in the cartoon, and then just reading Lord of the Rings and stuff, we just made things up. And they weren't real rules. I was making things. Oh, roll above 4 to do this thing, and then eventually I met these guys in high school, and they had the books. And this is one of those books. And I'm in the same second ed game since 1991 with the same character. And then we have our other games have intersected since then and stuff. And when you're doing these things, it's not too different from doing improv. You're doing different voices. You're embodying these characters and figuring out what they would do next without a script. And little did I know, I was kung fu training for what would pay the rent later in life. So I'm going to shut up now because I'm just going to keep love bombing
No pressure, David.
Oh my goodness. So like I said, my D&D is this D&D, the cartoon. I was under 10 years old in the 80s, and I loved cartoons, and I loved this Dungeons & Dragons cartoon. And there's something about the kids who get on this roller coaster and go through a magical portal. They're normal kids, come out on the other side, and they're super powerful, and they're in this world where everybody is different. There's a lot of weirdness going on, and they're going around adventuring, sort of being themselves and that sort of thing. And I was a kid, and I just loved it. And then I grew up, and I realized that I was part of the LGBTQ+ community. And I was like, maybe that's why I was drawn to this cartoon, where you could go through a magical portal and be your true self. I don't know. Maybe. There might be some correlation there. And that's what's the beauty of D&D. It's a world where really everybody is different. You can be who you want to be. And I think that's why there's a lot of, queer players who love this game, because they can just live your true self in these wonderful worlds. And then you mentioned Uni. Yeah. And I'm sure it was a challenge to figure out Uni's voice on the screen. And then I'm watching these. So I would write the comic book scripts while I have the TV going with playing all of the episodes. So my job is to literally write comics and watch cartoons at the very same time, and it is as amazing and wonderful as that sounds. Trust me. It's like I'm the 8-year-old kid again. Yeah.
Can we get the image up on the screen, please?
Yeah, it's up there. But then I had to figure out what the heck. I got to write a line of dialogue for Uni. What is this? And it's like B with a bunch of, it's like B with as many A's as I want to do in that particular panel.
It needs an L, I think.
Oh my gosh, the L is going in there. Yeah. I'm like, man, Katie, I'm not open to no. No, I'm just kidding. But it was wonderful, and Uni was probably the most challenging character. I love writing the script because I can hear their voices. I was reading proof of the newest issue, and at the first page, I was like, oh my gosh, Eric is talking to me. Sheila is talking to me right now. Hank is talking to me. It's their voices. Uni was so challenging and wonderful to write, because I'm like, Uni has to do cool stuff. We got to get Uni to be like, the kids are screwing everything up, and then Uni jumps off Eric's shield that's stuck in the wall and hits the rock that needs to fall to take out the monster. And I'm like, yes, Uni, you come and you save the day. This is Uni's story, and we are just watching it.
So then, David, on a creative standpoint, and Luke and I, we were talking about this earlier, a big problem, and I use the term loosely considering where we are today with pop culture and how gatekeeping isn't what it used to be. We're in such a better place about that, but, obviously it still happens. with Dungeons and Dragons, there was a big sense of gatekeeping, and if it wasn't the game and it wasn't purely the game, then it didn't really count. It didn't. It wasn't real, and the cartoon seemed to kind of catch the ire from a lot of people in regards to that, because it was baby stuff, or it was only Dungeons and Dragons in name. It wasn't really a part of the game. But as a child, that's where I learned what a beholder was. And that's what I learned what a bollywog was, and a horror hook, and, Lolth, and all of these awesome things I got from the cartoon. I didn't get from playing the game because I didn't have access to it when I was a kid. And now on the comic book, you've got them in the Forgotten Realms. We've got gelatinous cubes. We've got all these things happening here. So what is it like for you getting to really kind of solidify them as, no, this is a part of the game, this is the Forgotten Realms, and there's no turning back at this point?
Yeah, it's a fascinating process, because I work with Wizards of the Coast, and we're trying to meld the cartoon with the quote-unquote canon from the game. So we're still doing stuff from the cartoon that isn't in the game, but you're also seeing the cartoon is seeping back into the game, and so it's like this mix. So sometimes Wizards of the Coast will come back and say, "Oh, we want to do this," or "We want to do this." I don't know how. I probably shouldn't say anything at all before I get in trouble. But there's going to be opportunities, I think, where we are going to take potentially very iconic characters from the Dungeons and Dragons proper, and we might get to see the Saturday morning cartoon versions of these characters that we know outside of that, and that's what I want to see. I want to be that kid who sees. I can't. I'm not gonna drop it.
I know you want to.
I'm totally gonna slip. But
Don't do it.
I know.
Do you have to get permission to use the characters from the cartoon in the comic book?
Yeah, so IDW works with Wizards of the Coast to license the property for the comics, and then I write the scripts, and Wizards of the Coast comes back and says, "These 20 pages are great, please rewrite these 18 pages." No, it's not like that, trust me. Yeah, so they come back and they say, "Well, we want to do this. We're doing this next year, so we would love the comic to go this direction." So it's a lot of moving pieces, and it's a puzzle that I'm just...
So Wizards owns the cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Hasbro, it's all the face in the sky, and I just am like, "Here, thank you."
Venger owns it.
Avenger, that one horn just looks down on me. Hit your deadlines.
There's a lot of things with one horn.
Yep. It's weird. You look up and there's the person there from Wizards is talking to you, and you look at your desk and you see the shadow of one horn, right?
Oh yeah, you see the one horn Venger, and you turn around and it's my editor.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
He's going.
I do want to tell the story of how Venger only has one horn, but
Ooh.
do we know?
Yeah, I think he gave the other one to Uni.
It is Uni's story. I told you.
There you go.
I told you.
See, Bender's not an all bad guy. Yeah. There you go.
Katie, every time I look your way, I just want to call you Sheila, and this is fantastic. Can we give Katie a round of applause for this amazing cosplay? Katie, let's talk about Sheila a little bit. Okay. Every group of characters in any form of entertainment, there's always a character who views themselves as kind of the weak link. For years, the Teen Titans comic books, Aqualad always viewed himself as the weaker character, and which is so not true. And Sheila is one of those characters who a lot of the time viewed herself as she didn't have a lot to offer in the sense of power. But Sheila, to me, was always the heart of that group. She was who kept them grounded. And there's an episode I'll bring up in a few minutes when we start talking about a specific episode. But the characters don't really succeed without her. What was it like for you playing that character, finding what her voice was, not just performance, but who is she tangibly? Because every character needs to be tangible if you're going to care about them as the audience.
Well, I think with Sheila, because her brother was there, she was very protective. So she kind of fell into that role of den mother, so to speak, because, you know, she's got to look out for him. She's a big sister. So I think that sort of naturally, came about. She doesn't have any superpower per se, except being invisible. But I think that's why she's there, because she's got to look after him, and then he's running around like a knucklehead, and the Uni's running around, and she's kind of got both of them under her, and trying to manage between Eric's attitude and and Hank's really cute, so.
No, I love that you brought all that up, because this is the dynamic of the characters here, and this is where I want to get to. And I know, Mark, by this point you were already off the show, but to me, beyond the strength of the actors, because every actor who plays their character on the show is so perfectly cast that you hear their voice immediately when you read David's comic books, when you look at these toys, when you see them on the art now, on the starter kit. Like it all comes together just so perfectly. And a big part of that also has to do with what I still consider to be the most emotionally deep and most emotionally mature cartoon of the 80s. And I think that's why, a huge part of why the show was gone before its time. So with that, you've got, Michael Reeves, beyond everybody on that show, and please give Michael Reeves a round of applause. Because unfortunately, we recently lost him, and Michael Reeves wrote what I would consider is the gem of this cartoon, and everybody knows what episode that is. The Dragon's Graveyard. Thank you. If you guys don't know what the Dragon's Graveyard is about, quick, fast, the kids are getting tired of losing their ability to get home. They're starting to get homesick, and they're starting to get angry at Dungeon Master, and it's basically, tell us how to get home because we're tired of the runaround. So he tells them, you got to go to the Dragon's Graveyard. You're going to go there, and you're going to get your powers going, because they decide they are going to kill Venger. They straight out on the cartoon say, it's the only way we're going to get home is if we end him. By the time we get to the finale of the episode, the weapons are so powerful. They've got Tiamat coming after Venger. It's all awesome. Holy cow, amazing. Hank pulls back the bow, lets the arrow go, and doesn't kill Venger. And the response is, I didn't kill you because that would make us as bad as you. We're better than you. And so many parents looked at this show as, the satanic panic we were talking about earlier. They were looking at it as it's violent. This character is talking about killing the villain. But they weren't really looking at what the episode was actually about. And what that show as a whole was about was finding your found family, coming together, making the right decisions when it's hard, and not doing the right thing when it's easy. And when we bring up emotional depth on that show,
You mean the wrong thing when it's easy?
I'm sorry?
Not doing the wrong thing?
Thank you. I can't speak English today. I'm from the Bronx. So I always find that episode in particular to be the standout of this show. And I don't know how you guys feel as far as the ability to tell emotionally mature stories in 1983 when everything else was designed to sell toys. This one wasn't. There was a toy line that had nothing to do with this. This got to purely tell stories.
It was odd that way, huh? We didn't really have toys. I think when you don't actually kill the bad guy, that gives you hope that you have a job for the next season.
You have any thoughts on any of that, Mark, as far as the writing and the approach
the writing,
to it?
They had some very good writers on the show. This was case. I became a spectator of this show when I, moved on to other projects. And a friend of mine named Steve Gerber, who I recommended to work on the show, wrote. I think I helped Steve with with a script at one point. He was a very good writer. This goes back to Hank Soroyan. It goes back to Steve. It goes back to some of the writers who were brought in. There was a producer, Bob Richardson, who had an awful lot to do with how this show looked. There was a man named Bob Klein who had a lot to do with how that show looked and how rich it was visually. And I think some of the actors had a lot to do. when you write a cartoon show, over the years, there were a lot of times there would be a show that is in production, and they would call me up and they say, the show's not coming out very well. This did not happen with D&D. But they say, can you come in and help us, doctor the show? The ones we're doing now aren't that good. We're doing the first 13 episodes. And I say, how many of you got done now? And they say, 9. And I say, it's over. You cannot think of a cartoon show that got better after its 9th episode. Either they were all good, or they were, But once you have the first episode going, you build on it, and you build on it, and people came in and built on it. And what I gave them, I think, was a skeleton to hang ideas on. And the lady at CBS, Judy Price, deserves an awful lot of credit. She was a gutsy lady. She's the one who put the Pee-wee's Playhouse show on the air. She's the one who who let the Muppet Babies just do whatever they basically wanted to.
That's true.
I did a show for her for 8 years called Garfield and Friends that I produced. And, you hear a lot in this business about network notes and network interference, and network doesn't like this. The amount of notes that I got in 8 years on Garfield was 0. Wow. And network decided after the first season they didn't even need to read the scripts. So I wrote them, we recorded them, they animated them, and then Judy would see them, read them after they were in production and say, hey, that's a good episode, why don't you do more like that? Or don't do that anymore, or whatever it was. And she had an awful lot of guts and courage. She turned down a lot of shows that were pitched to her as toy commercials. She felt, we're here to entertain. There's enough commercials on Saturday morning without the shows being commercials. And she stopped that, and if anybody had said, let's change the Dungeons & Dragons show so we could sell more props and toys and things, she would have said no, only if it fits the story. So I think you had a lot of integrity from a lot of people there helping out with it. And once the people kind of understood what the show was, the writers were kind of trying to do, can you top this? Can I do a better episode than this writer? Can I outdo this guy? And things like that, and it went on like that. And I just thought it was a very good brain trust of creative. The reason sometimes any TV show, cartoon otherwise, is good is because a lot of good people got together and got on the same wavelength at the same time, and they plussed each other.
And they also have to care about it.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
not just a job. They have to care about it.
Yeah, and Marvel Productions spent a lot of money on this show. There are studios that would have, whose motto was, do it cheap. You can tell by the initials of that phrase what the studios were. And Marvel Productions was not that way. They pumped tons of money into Muppet Babies.
Yeah.
That was a
Oh, yeah,
beautiful,
they did.
rich-looking show with film clips and guest stars, and they spent a lot of money on it, and it shows. And that's one of the reasons the show reruns, and why you went out and bought it the first time it was on home video, and then you bought the deluxe video on home video, and you'll buy the next version they bring out on home video, because each one gets a little better image and extra features and such on it.
If we can pull up the image that I have right here. This is from the episode Day of the Dungeon Master, talking about the animation quality of the show. Toy animation, the work that they did on is stunning, and this sequence right here, and I wish I had the video, and I apologize that I don't, but picture it in your head because it's awesome. It is what I still think is the scariest image of Venger as far as a character goes. It is complete toy flourish there. It just looks so rad. And this is what I mean about allowing it to be more than just a toy commercial. The characters got to be scary. There got to be real stakes. And with that being said, Luke, what was your father's take overall as far as the cartoon and how it turned out?
Well, I think there was a certain amount of reticence because I don't know what it was called, but there was basically a code where you had to make shows viewable for very young people and no violence and
standards and practices.
Standards and practices, yeah. So I think that probably soaked out a lot of what it would have been his, the way he envisioned D&D.
Sure.
However, everyone was ecstatic that there was Dungeons and Dragons cartoon on television, and we were hoping it was going to pave the way for that Dungeons and Dragons movie that the script was floating around for a while by William Goldman, James Goldman's brother. But yeah, no, he was very happy. It was going. He knew that was running smoothly. It was in capable hands, and he was pushing the movie and trying to make sure the company didn't collapse because there was a lot of financial shenanigans going on. There's a great book, kind of tells a biography of my dad's life. If anyone's interested, it's a wonderful story, human story, Empire of Imagination by Mike Whitwer, very good book. And then some of that drama as well, The Game Wizards by John Peterson. 2 great books. So if you want to know a little bit more, I think those are interesting reads.
Before we start taking questions, and if you have questions, please start lining up. I did want to pull up one more thing on the screen as far as you talking about the movies go. I want you guys to understand this panel doesn't happen without all of you who supported this cartoon still 40 years later. 4 decades for anything is amazing, but 4 decades for a cartoon that only went 3 seasons, and now we've got golden books and action figures. There was a European car commercial with the kids in it.
Amazing.
We've got
so good.
It was amazing.
Brazil.
And now
It was from Brazil.
Brazilian. Thank you. And then we've got them in the movie now, and it is just like look at how cool that is, right?
Yeah.
The fact that this is where we are is incredible, and the only reason Uni is not there is because Uni's off on his own adventure, because it's all Uni's story, as David told us.
You're looking at a side quest for Uni's main story.
Exactly. The kids had work to do. It's an amazing world right now. Next year, we've got the 50th anniversary of the game. Yep. The League of Malevolence is going to be a huge part of that next year, as they've already announced. And Avenger, the first time ever in a D&D module, will be the villain of a game. It's going to be amazing that the cartoon is finally being recognized as a specific and important part of the Dungeons & Dragons legacy. And all that happens because of the people up here and all of you guys out there. So it's amazing.
David, did you want to say why Avenger had only 1 horn?
What's that?
Did David want to say why Avenger had only 1 horn? Were you going to tell us that?
Are you going to tell us, David?
No, I want to tell that story. I have an idea, but I don't want to spoil.
Oh, you want to tell it in a comic book that we
I
can
don't
buy?
think that story's
Okay.
has that story ever been told?
Nope.
No, I love the idea that they're joined because Uni has 1 horn and he has the other. That's very obvious, and I'm sad right now that I didn't think of it myself. But trust me, you're in very good hands. Trust me.
Okay.
But I do have an idea.
I thought you were going to tell it now. Okay, never mind.
All right, so let's take the first question. Thank you for joining us.
So cartoons are way different now than they were back then. Like now there's all serialized on Netflix, and you can, there's not as strict as they are on standards and practices and all that. Do you think like a reboot with like modern, like I guess the best example would be like the new He-Man, not the Kevin Smith one, but the other one, the CG one more aimed at kids, where it's got the same feel as like the 80s one, but they can actually kind of do a real story now with
More blood?
not so much blood, but like I don't even think like he can actually punch Skeletor now or something. Like he couldn't even do that in the 80s. And it's not the Saturday morning cartoon where you could watch the episodes out of order and still made sense. You actually have to watch them in order now, so there's more investment. Do you think there's any hope of like a reboot, like the same premise, but with the modern storytelling we get today from like Netflix and Disney Plus and Amazon or whatever?
I mean, hope springs eternal is what I would say. I know a lot of people would love to see this cartoon remade. Some want to see it done as more, something that 13 plus would be able to watch.
Well, not even that, because like the He-Man one I mentioned isn't 13 plus, but it's still not the Saturday morning cartoon you got in the 80s. So.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying the couple ideas I've heard were for
anything is possible in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Ooh, man. Oh, and sir, you asked the question. Come up here. Everybody asks a question, gets a little something from us.
Ooh.
How about
it's not
everybody?
Saturday morning without breakfast cereal.
By the way, this is TJ's birthday weekend, you guys.
Yeah, it is. Everyone gets a little.
Can I tell them what this
Please do.
So we are actually, there's a Saturday morning cartoon, Endless Summer one-shot that's coming out next month. We're doing a variant cover that is an 80s cereal box that we never got for Dungeons & Dragons, the cartoon. And so the giveaway is your little cereal box with Dungeons &
That's very
Love it.
unique.
so
That's
cool.
one of a kind.
Fun.
Well, 8 of a kind. Right?
All right. Next question.
Hi. Just to sort of jump off that, if my dates are correct, I was actually born on the same day that Valley of the Unicorns was aired.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's really nice to have a Dungeons & Dragons part of my life, even from the very beginning. Sort of to expand upon what TJ started and what the rest of you were going towards with regards to how subtly the show itself was far more mature than a lot of people actually realized. One of the things that I really liked about the show was that for the kids in trying to get home, it was less about like actively engaging in fights all so much, and more so much about like just trying to survive and just keep moving, and exemplified by the defensive-based weapons and magical items that they have, such as Sheila's cloak and Eric's shield being more defensive and pushing folks apart. This is probably more for David and Frank, but the other ones can also join in about it. Did you feel when you first started watching the show that this sort of idea of it's less about winning and it's more about surviving, was that something that kind of resonated with you as you watched the show that set it apart from everything else?
That's fantastic. That's a fantastic way of looking at it. And yeah, I think that as you watch the show, the character interactions kind of solidify, because they're very different characters in the beginning. As we go along, they kind of know each other more, and there wasn't a lot of shows that did that, you know, like He-Man and Skeletor are always going to have that relationship, Man-at-Arms and He-Man are always going to have that relationship, but these grew over the episodes, and I think that was because of the peril they were in. And just to kind of go off on a tangent, you had mentioned the found family aspect of the kids that are thrust into this world, which is an amazing setup. It's kind of a reflection of the game itself. Like I've got a found family that I've known for 30 years playing this thing, and it's a direct kind of correlation to these very different kids. Like, you know, they make fun of Eric, but they love Eric, you know. So there's a way that those relationships are solidified, and perhaps the peril is part of what did that. So
Yeah, and for me, every time I start looking at a story, especially sort of a long-form story like a TV show or a comic book that's ongoing, I just look for that emotional core to it. Like, what's going to make readers really care about what's happening? And there's just something so genuine, and so there's almost like a protectiveness that you feel when these kids are like 12, 13. Bobby was 9, 14 years old, and they're just trying to get home, and there is episode after episode obstacles in that way, and you're just cheering. It's like watching The Mandalorian, and if he was just out doing jobs, that's one thing, but he has Grogu with him, and I watched it. If anything happened to Grogu, I would have flipped the table. So it's that emotional core, and I think kudos to Mark, because I think that's where the show, that's the seed of the success that it grew into, was that emotional premise. Let's get these kids home.
By the way, real quick, if anybody speaks Spanish, this book came out, Dragones y Mazmorras by Octavio Lopez San Juan. It's a complete history of the cartoon.
Wow.
And they interviewed me, they interviewed Mark, they interviewed Buzz, they interviewed a bunch of people. And it's all in Spanish, but it's amazing. If you want to see it, I'll show it to you. I'll bring it to
We'll bring that up in a few minutes.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. That's going to be really cool, though.
Okay.
Here is your cereal box. Thank you very much.
Please don't hurt Uni.
No.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Can you imagine if I'd said all that and then I'm like, oh, Uni's gone? No, I'm just kidding. Never. I would never.
How's it going, man?
It's going great. Thank you. So Dungeons & Dragons changed media. It changed gaming. It changed fantasy. And thanks to the advent of the internet, anyone and everyone on Earth can play it physically, digitally, and in any number of different ways. It has shows, it has games, it has toys, it has prizes, it has everything. It's a Pokemon-level phenomenon that cannot be stopped. When the aliens come down and archive us for remains in their museums, D&D is going to get a whole wing to itself.
Did you want 2 cereal boxes?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're
And
just
now
giving
back-
them away.
Now back to the show.
So I guess my question, after all of that buildup, what is it like being part of a legacy like that?
Oh, yeah. I tell you what, it's really amazing. I didn't think that much of it growing up because that's just what my dad did, right? So I didn't really appreciate it. And it really, it struck me, obviously, people recognized my name and stuff. For those who don't know, my dad lost his company to a hostile stock takeover in 1985. So we don't have any, we don't own any piece of D&D anymore. But I do have this legacy, and his work impacted so many people. And, I knew it was a great game. But after he passed away in 2008, just the thousands of people outpouring and telling stories about how Dungeons & Dragons changed their lives, how they were in a tough spot in their life, and this was something that they were able to lean on, and it helped them get through that time period. And, oh, by the way, they're, maybe they had dyslexia or something, and now they were able to, they overcame that through Dungeons & Dragons and became a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it is. I kept hearing these stories, and it just made me want to be an evangelist for Dungeons & Dragons and to, make sure that my father's name wasn't forgotten, which obviously there's been a big rise of D&D again, which has been pretty cool.
Yes.
With 5th edition, so thank you, Mike Merles and his team, for that. But it's amazing. I feel very honored and humbled. And it's nothing more that I enjoy than hearing people's positive stories. And I try to, salute all the folks who made D&D great from the beginning until now. Every year in March in Lake Geneva at GaryCon, a memorial convention to my dad. So if you're going to be in Lake Geneva or you want to travel on the 50th anniversary to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, badges go on sale July 29th.
Thank you very much. We have 10 minutes left. We're going to keep getting through questions. I'm going to make an announcement real quick before I give you your 2 cereal boxes. You earned them. Real quick, just so you guys know, at the end of the panel, at the exit right over there, this lovely print that you see, this lovely lithograph at the end of the table, done by the fabulously talented Jamie Sullivan and colored by his daughter, Audrey. We will have that at the Condemned Comics booth for a signing with the lovely Katie Leigh at 1 o'clock. There will be 100 wristbands that you can get outside the exit. And if those are done, there will be 50 standby wristbands. It is $60 for the print with the autographs as well. So come and see them today because it is amazing and there are only 100 made.
Talk about tomorrow?
Yes, as well. Please do.
Okay, and then
Such a deal.
I'm
beat
getting
that.
one. Hopefully. I'm going to get a wristband, I guess. Tomorrow at the IDW booth at 3 p.m., I'm going to be signing. There is a con-exclusive Dungeons & Dragons. It's a very cool wraparound cover, and on the back, it's the entrance to the roller coaster.
Ooh.
First time I think it's appeared on a cover, so come by tomorrow, 3 p.m. at IDW booth.
Thanks, guys. Got to make those plugs while we can. It's like pro wrestling. Next question.
I'm sorry, just 1 second. Just out of respect to our other Comic-Con people, please have your question concise and ready so we can get through as many here in the last 10 minutes. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
For Mr. Evanier, how much did you know about Dungeons & Dragons before you got the assignment, and did you have any time to do any research on the original material in those 4 days?
I had absolutely no time. I had never seen Dungeons & Dragons in my life. I learned about it as much as I could afterwards and went, oh, if I'd known about that, I would have put that in. But, my mission was to get the network to say, yes, we'll put on a series. And once they said yes, then we could do a lot of fixing, and that's the hurdle. You get through that. And you forget about a lot of stuff in the Bible. We had planned, and I had planned at least, to put back a lot of things that were cut out, and they never got put back in. That I cut out because it had to be a reading experience for the 12 people at CBS who had to nod their heads and say, yes, we'll do this. I had to go into a meeting with the top vice presidents of CBS, the entire network, not just the Saturday Morning, and pitch this thing and tell them how wonderful it would be, and act like I knew a lot more about Dungeons and Dragons than I did. So no, I didn't know much about it until then. And anyway, it's
So you're an actor too.
sometimes in this world you have to bluff.
Thank you very much.
Sounds like you'd be a good dungeon master, Mark.
Sir, don't forget your cereal.
Hi, thank you very much for all your great products and mediums that you guys put out. The question is very straightforward. In all the worlds, I know that not about the money and the getting it out there, but with all the universes out here, is there any way to kind of consolidate and bring it together, especially for the lowest level, people who haven't really been able to get into Dungeons & Dragons at the lowest level, to say, hey, look, there's a consolidated universe, bring together all these different great worlds, and maybe allow people to really experience it for the first time?
That'd be a great question to pose to Wizards of the Coast.
Honestly, I don't think we could answer that quite. Perhaps. We shall say perhaps.
Anything is possible, and sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go. Anything is possible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm really enjoying the comic book. It's been great.
Oh,
and
thanks.
I just wanted to say, I was wondering, I think you kind of already said it earlier, but any chance we'll have like a Drist crossover?
Yes.
Should we say it together? Anything is possible.
Anything is possible in the realm of
Dungeons and Dragons.
Tennis, maybe?
Have you been approached to maybe make a video game by any chance?
I mean,
Who's even in charge of this?
Not me.
None of us on the panel are really in charge of anything. We all have our Avengers.
But that's a great idea. You should send it to your favorite video game company.
Hasbro told me they were really excited that this panel is happening, and then there was a period at the end of the sentence.
But maybe your presence here will nudge them.
Right, because I was going to say, just the fans and the fan response and messages and supporting everything that they're doing with the cartoon is a message to Hasbro and WotC that are Wizards of the Coast that we need more, we want more. So all of you here will take a big photo, we'll send it directly to the, no, I'm just kidding. But we will put it on social media.
Yeah, look, you filled the room. That's awesome.
It's amazing,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Next question.
I was a huge fan of Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, but one of the things that I hated that was that, when I bought the DVD, was that they never did the last episode where they got home. I know anything's possible in the realms of Dungeons and Dragons, but is that possibly in the works for that actually to
If you're on the
completely-
the Facebook page, there's a group. Some people have made it themselves.
Yep.
And you can see it. Go on the Facebook group.
The Dungeons and dragons cartoon group. Yep.
There's no follow-up questions.
Can I say it? Can I say it?
Yeah.
Do it.
Anything is possible in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
Hi, I used to watch the cartoon when I was a kid in Mexico, and I always wanted to get the toys from the series. And now that they're here, I wanted to know if they're going to make even bigger size, the characters, like the Tiamat and the kids.
I can answer that one quickly. That is a Hasbro question. But it's a good question, man.
We need someone from Hasbro on this panel.
Hi, I just want to give some love to the Dungeon Master. He has not been mentioned at all. I love the Dungeon Master. And he should have been played by Danny DeVito in the movie.
Oh, I thought about that. Danny DeVito. We're watching Always Sunny, and I'm like, oh my God, it's him.
I love the character designs. Who designed the characters for
Takeshi? You want to talk about that, Mark Evanier?
Takashi did most of the designs. I also mentioned Bob Klein, who was a wonderful. They had a group. a great staff of artists, and the show attracted. When great artists are working on a show, other artists, great artists, want to work with them, and you have this lovely little brain trust of creative people. And I think even some of them aren't even sure who designed what because everybody's changing everybody else's, improving everybody else's design in an environment like that.
All right, so that was our last question for the day. And before we wrap up, anybody who wasn't able to get a question, like we said, we have the signing with Katie and Jamie at 1 o'clock at Condemned Comics. There is the signing tomorrow with David at the IDW booth. And before we wrap up, I did want to make one more mention of something. We didn't just lose Michael Reeves within the last year, but we also lost Adam. And I just want to make sure that that Presto gets some love too, because this show, these characters it's not what it is without all of them together. So just want to say that we loved Adam and we miss him dearly. And so with that, I just want to say thank you so much to this amazing group of panelists, this amazing party right here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for being here. You guys are amazing. And look at this party right over here, guys. Thank you so much.
Looking good.
Okay,
And
guys,
keep it going
follow
for
them down
TJ.
to their booth, and no signings or anything right here. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Comic-Con attendees, phone was found, so did one of you lose your phone? I'm up here at the front. But Comic-Con